Hello, and welcome to Anatomy and Physiology. We're starting with Chapter 1, An Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. The beginning of this book is going to teach you how to study anatomy and physiology. Research has shown that art is incredibly important for you to understand the topic. They've done studies that those students who look at the art and study the art as well as read the text do much better. So art and text go hand in hand. And that's one of the reasons we go with this visual textbook, because the art is so good. When you open up your textbook, you'll find out that on a 2-page spread, everything you need to know about that topic is right there in front of your eyes. The art, the text, everything. So you do want to focus on reading your captions, looking at the artwork, and following along with the numbers. Sometimes pictures are numbered and you follow from one number to the next to understand the artwork. Like any book, it's going to read left to right, column by column. Look for the red blocks. Some of the artwork has colored red has numbered red blocks. So you start with number 1 and move through properly through the artwork. Some of these topics are really complex. Even this particular picture is very complex and difficult to understand. So you do start with number 1 and move your way through the art. Here's an example of the red blocks. You can see it's not really going in an order that may come natural to you, so you have to follow the numbering. So you start with number 1, read that, look at the artwork, move on, follow the arrows to number 2 and number 3. So when you talk about body parts of another person, you have to always, you're the doctor and that other person is the patient. So you have to describe it in terms of their body parts. So their right arm, their, left shoulder, and so on. So we always start with anatomical position, and you can see that it's standing erect, facing forward, arms at the side, palms forward. And if some of the cross sections require lying face up in a supine position, palms up. So here in this text, all body cross sections are from exactly the same perspective. So it's always anatomical position. So this woman's bracelet, is it on her right arm or her left arm? This is on her right arm. Now here are some of these cross-sectional views. And so this requires you to understand that you are looking through the patient from the feet upward. And so here is this section through the abdomen, and you can see all of these parts that are labeled. So here's the MRI scan, and can you identify what is at the X here? It's the left kidney. So anatomy is structure and function. So knowing what is the structure, knowing the structure doesn't necessarily mean you know the function. The black box is when you know what something does but not how it does it. So it's just important to keep in mind structure and function. How does it work? Here are some interesting tips on how to succeed. Think out of the box as you're approaching the information. Always have a nice study schedule. You're expected to study a couple hours a day. Practice your memorizations. No shortcuts. No one in the world can get through anatomy and understand the material without putting in that time. You won't be attending lectures, but there will be videos for you to watch. The labs are time consuming. If you were in class on campus, you'd be spending 3 hours a week in lab, as well as possibly 2 hours a week outside preparing the materials. You have 8 labs. So you will be spending quite a bit of time on your lab. Don't expect to get through them quickly. For online students, I think the biggest problem is the time management or lack of time management, which means some students will procrastinate and it's just not possible. There are time deadlines. You have to keep up with the material. If you're having any trouble whatsoever, you need to talk to your instructor. One of the important concepts we will be starting with is homeostasis, and the definition of that is maintaining a stable internal environment. So biology is the study of life. Bio is life, ology, study of. All living things have basically the same functions. They have to respond to their environment. They have to adapt, grow, develop, and reproduce. Some can move, and maybe that movement is from one place to another, or some plants, adjust to the light and move toward the light like a sunflower. It's still movement. Organisms share some common characteristics. All organisms are composed of cells, and they have a specific arrangement of these cells, a specific organization. They are all responsive. That is, they respond to a stimulus, and all maintain a relatively stable internal environment. And I hope you remember that is homeostasis. Organisms also grow and develop. They reproduce, and all have metabolic processes. That means all the chemical processes that are taking place in the cell. It could be a building process, such as making a protein. It could be a breaking down process, such as digesting your food. And here are two generic terms that mean building up and breaking down. You have to build something before you break it down. A comes before C, so anabolic is building, catabolic is breaking down. Here are some of the processes of life. Respiration. For us, oxygen is definitely required. We inhale oxygen, exhale carbon dioxide, and those gases are carried around the body through the cardiovascular system. So to respire and move those gases, it requires the respiration and circulation. Digestion is mechanical and chemical process. So mechanical would be chewing. Chemical is enzymes digesting our foods into simple substances that then can be absorbed. Circulation, internal movement, distribution of oxygen, wastes, and digestion products. Excretion, getting rid of undigested foods. And our kidneys or urinary system gets rid of wastes of metabolism. So with your textbook, you will always see these review questions. I suggest you answer them. I suggest when you're reading your book, you take notes. I suggest you write the answers to these questions down. These are many of the things they're the key components of that section, and you have to be able to answer these questions to do well on any test. So understand your learning outcomes and be able to do all of the review questions. So we begin with anatomy and physiology. The definitions. Anatomy it means cutting open, but anatomy is the study of structure. So you can see the heart here. Once you open up the heart, you can see all the internal structures. Now, gross anatomy is also called macroscopic anatomy, and it's the study of structures you can see with the naked eye, such as the heart. Microscopic anatomy requires a microscope. So if you wanted to look at the individual layers of the heart, the different cells that make up the different layers of the heart, or the tissues, you would need to use a microscope. And there are quite a few microscopes you could use. What you'll be seeing in your textbook most will be pictures from electron microscopes, which magnify much more than the light microscope. So physiology is the study of function, and it's much more difficult than the study of structure. While we know that structure and function are related. Sometimes it's taken years to understand the function once we've understood the structure. In our textbook, functions are definitely more difficult than structures. So if you were to look at an ECG or an electrocardiogram graph, you would see peaks and valleys. You would see some, at this point you don't understand what all these peaks and valleys mean on here, but it deals with the functioning of the heart. It deals with, what's going on with the heart in terms of contracting and relaxing. And while this is a much more involved graph down here showing you what's going on with the heart, it's still involved with function. Physiology is the study of function. Again, here are the review questions. You should be able to answer them. I would write the answers down. There'll be test questions at some point. And you do want to study for the future. That is, your goal is not just to pass every test. Your goal is to pass the final exam, which is comprehensive, covers every chapter. This example of the elbow is just talking about how the function is dependent upon the structure. That is, the relationship between structure and function. And in this case, your elbow can only move like a hinge, up and down. It can't twist, it can't rotate, it bends, just like the hinge on a box. And this is because of the structure of that elbow. So this bone that goes to your pinky is the ulna, and that bone has got a cup-shaped depression that encircles the rounder portion of the humerus. So they fit together, and their function is extremely specific. Anatomical structures impose functional limits. This is just a microscopic analogy. Just as the function of the elbow was dependent on the structure, at the cellular level, the function is dependent on the structure. Chemical messengers and chemical receptors are examples of this. Our cells, our endocrine glands produce hormones, and those hormones only act on specific target cells with receptors. It's a shape thing. The shape of the chemical messenger will fit exactly into the shape of the receptor molecule. What term refers to changes in an organism's behavior, capability, or structure in response to a changing environment? Adaptability. Visual examination of a specimen's cells and tissues is an example of microscopic anatomy. A group of cells working together for a specific function make up which of the following? Tissue.